Hey guys, it's Watch from 6 or More, and today we'll be talking about how to build your Kayo, armed and dangerous, for beginners. So talking points would be the mindset you'll need going into building your first fully built KO deck, the types of cards that will be in your KO deck, as well as deck building exercise we'll be taking on the way to building your first deck, as well as the subtypes of cards that you'll need to take into account once you're a bit more advanced in your Flesh and Blood journey. So number one, you need to have a clear goal. In this case, for KO generally has two modes, full aggro and value mid-range. Full aggro would be sending 4 or 5 card hands, maximizing offensive damage, offensive value, and raw HP or life damage. You're going to be using your equipment aggressively, such as Savage Sash. This is opposed to value mid-ranging, which would generally be looking to play 2 and block 2, maximizing the total offensive and block value of your cards, then using your equipment to mainly protect yourself from CNCs and other disruptions with your 2 block fridge. Number 2 is, we need to know what is our perfect turns and the needed pitch values for those perfect turns, because that is what we are supposed to be playing around. When you're going into the game as a value mid-range deck, you could start building your deck around the idea that you're going to be playing 2 cards and blocking with 2 cards. On the other side, you'd need all 4 cards or all 5 cards to maximize offensive value, to threaten the most amount of HP in the least amount of time. So, for our deck building exercise, we would be going with the aggressive leaning KO, and we'd want to maximize 3 and 6 pitch curve values. First off, the main types of cards that we'll put in our deck, that will be the equipment, the core brute majestics, blues, starters, enders, and the filler. And later on, we'll be talking about the subtypes, the 1-cost cards, whiffs, disruption, go again, and go again sources. So for our equipment, there are 4 equipment that will always be part of our deck: the Mandible Claw, Scowling Fleshbag, Savage Sash, and Apex Bonebreaker. These 4 are always present in every list for a good reason. They are the best options value-wise. Scowling Fleshbag gives 2 block and potentially saving us more damage from the Intimidate since they can't swing the card. This could also allow us to gain tempo by making them lose a card. Additionally, this will force them to arsenal that card, and that's a potential target for our send packing and our CNCs. Savage Sash has a block 2, could be a block 3, but you almost never use it as a block 3, and it could discount up to 3 cards if set up properly. Apex Bonebreaker is at minimum a block 3, but is generally 5 value once taking into account the other 2 might tokens that you will be making. Our first decision point is for the equipment: trackers versus cabs. Beaten trackers turns any draw discard effect into a wild ride, so your Bear Fangs can enable your aggressive turns. Additionally, beaten trackers can be used for aggressive blocking it at turn 1 so that if your turn 2 hand whiffs, you have an out. Meanwhile, with Scabskin Leathers, it blocks 2 and 1 for a total of 3. Generally, you'd be using the first block of 2 for the equipment fridge, blocking a total of 6 on a CNC. Then you would block the second block, which is a value of 1, for a random breakpoint that you might need. There is an estimated value of action points whenever you roll the Scabskin Leathers of 1.5. However, rolling a 1 basically means you lose the game. So for this decision point, we go back to the deck building mindset, and we will choose beaten trackers because we want our 4 card hands to always work. We will be planning mainly around the 4 card hands, even if sometimes we will be forced to take 2 card hands. So here's what our deck looks like right now. with the 5 cards that we've added. Next would be the core Majestics. Blood Rush Bellows, Beast Within, Send Packing, Swing Big, and Command and Conquer. These are the semi-guaranteed 15 cards that you will have in your KO deck. It is the best of the best in their corresponding aspects when it's only a semi-guaranteed, because sometimes you'd only want 2 copies of Send Packing as opposed to 3. Blood Rush Bellow is the best whiff. Send Packing and Command and Conquer are the best disruption pieces for KO. Beast Within is the best card to be discarding off of your random draw discards. Meanwhile, Swing Big is the best and most efficient damage card in the game as a 2-card 8. So for now, we'll be taking 3 of each card, but taking 2 copies of Send Packing. Our second main decision point, this time for the core Majestics, would be putting in E-Strikes. So what is good about E-Strike? E-Strike would be able to salvage your all-red hands because you could be using 1 card or 2 cards to block, then sending 2 card 7s or 2 card 8s if you have the might with your remaining cards. That would allow you to still function properly even if you do with an all-red hand. However, we go back to our mindset of maximizing our pitch curve value. This card's cost is 0, however, it has a sync effect. So essentially, it's a 3 pitch cost versus our 1 cost or 2 costs. Additionally, this isn't a card that you could affect with Savage Sash, so it will always be quote-unquote a 3 cost, as opposed to something like Send Packing that you could discount and turn into 2 pitch. Additionally, does E-Strike fit into our aggro game plan? Not necessarily, because you can't reliably cheese Go Again, unlike with Aurora and Snapdragon Scalers. Additionally, if you choose Mode Draw card, which would most likely be most people's options with Enlightened Strike, the draw isn't guaranteed to be a good arsenal target, since we aren't a red line deck. If you draw blue, mainly something like Wrecker Romp, your arsenal is practically dead, or you'd be forced to IP1. The pro is, you get a good 2-card hand play, which we will still want to play, but we shouldn't be necessarily actively playing around it. So the verdict for this core Majestic would be to cut it. This is what our deck looks like as of now, with the first 14 cards in the deck. Now for our blues. For KO, generally, the goal ratio of blues is around 18 to 24 cards. I won't explain yet why, but generally, brutes want a even spread of reds, yellows, and blues, which is due to the fact that most of your cards is costing 2 or 1. This ratio would be affected by your personal preference, of course, and your cost curve. Generally, E-Strikes would mean less blues, more 1 costs would mean less blues, and if your deck has 3 costs such as Massacre, Savage Beatdown, and the usual Send Packing, you would need more blues. Playstyles also are taken into account when setting together your blue ratio. Mid-range doesn't really care about the ratio per se. However, an aggressive playstyle would be leaning into the more balanced approach so that less of your hands whiff. For the blues, I would say there's 4 ones that are guaranteed to be part of your deck and 3 copies each. The wind-ups will always be good for their effect. Run Roughshod is a 1 cost 5 attack card, and Wrecker Romp is the only raw 6 talentless brute action card, which you can use for your Apex Bonebreaker. Then there's everything else. We would need around 6 to 12 cards from this list. The vanilla cards are a bit self-explanatory why we'd want them in our deck. Smash Instinct is a good finisher. Assault and Battery sometimes has use as an agility creator. Riled Up is more damage. Packall gives us a bit more consistency, and reincarnate is just never bad. For tech options, Battlefront Bastion is good against the Rise of Syndra, giving us a prevent 1, so you can block an ignite for 2, then prevent the 1 dagger that's coming at you next. Savage Swing is tech into Nu, since Nu won't be able to use Savage Swing since it needs an additional random discard. And generally, that random discard would be their Slither, which would be bad for them. Then there's Reckless Swing, which would be a great finisher into slow, grindy matches where both players would be at low HP. Then last but not the least, a spicy card that's blue is Tear Limb from Limb. It's essentially a blue Wild Ride. Draw this card, go again, with plus X. X generally being anywhere from 5, 6, or 8. Which is practically what Wild Ride does, but in blue. So, in this case, we'll be adding 24 blues of the following cards as an example. Next, the starters. Starters are cards you would want to start your chain with because they draw and discard, have go again, and since you've discarded a 6, most likely, you would also trigger the Mandible Claw. Then you could send your third card in your chain, which will be an Ender that we'll talk about later. This is very self-explanatory. Just put them in. Wild Ride Yellow, Wild Ride Red, Pulping Red, and in this case, we already put in Tear Limb from Limbs from the previous section, as well as put in Beaten Trackers from the previous section. This means we have 12 starters in the deck. 1 in every 5 cards is a starter, which is a very safe amount to have. For the starters, we do have a decision point as well to run Yellow Pulping. Yellow Pulping would mean we have 3 more starters, so every 1 in 4 hands as opposed to every 1 in 5, since we'll have 15 of 60 cards. Another positive to this is the Dominate effect, leaking more damage, although with conjunction to the low damage output only being a 5 attack card, that Dominate leak would only leak for around 2 if they block with 1 card, which isn't a lot. Additionally, this is an unreliable source of go again in a meta that's dominated by defense reactions such as Sink Below, Rootbound Carapace, Shelter from the Storm, Sigil of Suffering, among others. So, we'll be deciding to cut Yellow Pulping from our deck. Enders. Literally, every 6 attack card in the Brute and Generic pool is under consideration for Enders. But in this case, we'll have the following cards: Bearfangs Red, Bearfangs Yellow, Massacre, Savage Feast, Swing Big, and Command and Conquer. I chose these 6 damage output cards in mind. Well, to talk about Swing Big and Command and Conquer, they're already the M's that are part of our deck. Meanwhile, Bearfangs is one of the most efficient commons damage-wise to have in your deck, as well as Yellow, still coming in for 7 Generate Might. Massacre, in conjunction with your other cards, would be a 8 card attack, 8 damage attack, that you could play with your Blood Rush Bellows for Blood Rush Bellows Claw Massacre. Then Savage Feast is a really good 1-cost card that you could sneak in your plays, as well as have good conjunction with Savage Sash. So that's so far 57 cards. And last but not the least, our fillers. Our decision point for the filler is the 2 Clash cards, Clash of Might and Clash of Agility, both of which can be sent for 6 damage. But generally, you get the most value out of this from blocking. You block with a Clash, most likely you will win because you're KO and have +1 on all your cards outside of the chain. And you get the corresponding benefit of a Might and an Agility token. And additionally, you'd probably be blocking with your Apex Bonebreaker for an extra Might. So the Clash of Might would be making the block, will be making 4 value, 3 from the block and 1 from the Might token. Meanwhile, Clash of Agility gives you inconsistent value, anywhere from 3 to 5, based on how impactful the agility would be. Where I think the biggest factor is, when it comes to comparing these two cards, is the play pattern you have with these two cards. The Clash of Might has a very clear play pattern you'd want to play. You block with the Clash of Might, maybe an Apex Bone Breaker, play 2 cards, then arsenal the 4th card to set up a bigger turn later, possibly with your Blood Rush Bellows. Meanwhile, Clash of Agility, if you have a 4-card hand and you block with Clash of Agility, you'll only have 3 left. So what are you going to use the Clash on? You'd need to be lucky to have 2 non-go-again cards in your hand, essentially. Maybe a Swing Big and a Run Roughshod, just so you could make use of that agility that you're getting. So, a bit clunky there. And with that, we go back to the deck building mindset for the decision, in which we'd want Clash of Might for its consistency in an inconsistent deck. So, we have our main 60. This is essentially how I built my ProQuest list from the Rosetta season, wherein I got 4 top 8s out of the 5 that I attended. Next, we go on to the subtypes of your cards. First off, we'll go with 1-cost cards. 1-cost cards that are in my previous list are Run Roughshod and Savage Feast. But of course, there are crazier ones like Freewheeling Renegades from Eugene C, Censor that has been a staple due to the rise of Zen during its pre-ban era, and Smash Up, which is a really good card that's printed in the rare slot for Rosetta. 1-cost cards are really good because you can make 3-card plays of 1 Wild Rite into a 1-cost. Then you arsenal your final red, presumably red card. Additionally, you could also do crazy 0-cost combos with Savage Sash, going in for Savage Sash Wild Ride Claw into 0-cost, arsenaling your 4th card, allowing your Savage Sash to discount 2 cards so you could sneak in an extra claw for quote-unquote free. Next, we'll be talking about whiffs. For whiffs, it really depends on your risk tolerance, how many you'd want, but generally from how I've been experimenting on the deck, as well as successful lists in the past, around 8 is a healthy maximum whiff count, although I usually run with around 5. Whiffs are high-value non-attack cards that really help you push for that unfair numbers that Brute currently doesn't have access to in a consistent way. In this case, Blood Rush Bellow is our only consistent power card, which is at minimum buffing you for 4 attack in 1 card, with the claw and the extra attack that you'll be sending after your claw. Usually also with the Blood Rush Bellow, you'll be able to arsenal your 4th card, only sending 3 of the 4 cards you start your hand with. Cast Bones is a really strong... Cast Bones is meanwhile a really strong value proposition, which we'll be talking about in the next slide. Reckless Swing can suddenly win you the game out of nowhere. And we've talked about Tear Limb from Limb being a blue Wild Ride. For whiffs, to cast Bones or not to cast Bones. Cast Bones is essentially an 8 value card. It's most likely going to make you 6 might, and a theoretical 2 value from the agility that you will be making. This would make turn 0 high rolling crazy, and there is even a potential for getting to play 2 cast Bones if you're running Scabskin Leathers. But the problem with cast bones is it's only good at turn 0, and if you do play it outside of turn 0, you pass the tempo back to your opponent, since if you do play this, it would have to be either you getting lucky off of a wild ride and not discarding your cast bones. The cast bones would be from your arsenal also, maybe is a possibility, but essentially you'd shut down your turn of sending damage to play this card, which again isn't part of our mindset going into building an aggressive list. However, in a more mid-rangey list, maybe you could make the case for this card. Disruption. So Send Packing and Command and Conquer are two of the best options to generally have in a KO deck, but other good ones are the Weakest Link, Amnesia, both good for Zen. Weakest Link being an option also into an Enigma matchup. Meanwhile, Amnesia being good into Vincent and Viserai, so that they'll forget the name of their rune chants. Erase Face has been really good during the Rosetta season against Dash, but this time around, it's also really good for Syndra. So these ones are really good as enders since they're mostly 2 cost. And Send Packing, you could sash or just take the L and just send it after your wild ride. And additionally, they're still good as a 2-card hand since you'll have your Might token, and this will be coming at an inconvenient breakpoint of 7. Go against sources. We've talked about our go against sources before, with the wild rides, pulping, tear limb from limb, beat and trackers being our starters, and the cards that generate agility as agility sources. However, there is an unconventional go against source, quote unquote go against source, which I'll just label as unconventional card conversion. So these are cards that allow you to convert your hand offensively. Blood Rush Bellows will allow you to have a 4-card hand. Will allow you to have a 3-card hand that's above rate, generally going for 13 to 15 damage in that ballpark, and you'd be able to arsenal the 4th card in your hand. Meanwhile, Savage Beatdown allows you to convert your discarded random card into 6 damage. And if you can't play all of your cards, Savage Beatdown becomes a really good option. You could theoretically do a Savage Sash pop into a Wild Ride, going in with a Mandible Claw, and the Savage Beatdown for your arsenal, allowing you to send all 5 cards, 4 from your hand, and the Savage Beatdown into your opponent. And I guess with that, that's how to build your KO for beginners. Thank you. I am Poch from 6 or More, and if you like the video, please like and subscribe. And stay tuned for more Brute content as well as Armory Deck deep dives.